going to say bullshit. They're going to tell you that there's no way that the government's going to pay you $5,000 for an $5,000 a week, and it's actually over $250,000 a year for an $800,000 investment property. But we have a house that was cost $460,000 that's getting nearly $240,000 a year. So better than expected, like I said before.
Joe, can I just add something? And I'd like to say a big hello to everyone who's joined the meeting today. And thank you for making it, Tanya. Something that you touched on, Joe, regarding finance brokers. Everyone might be saying, yeah, my broker's the best and I've got this bank. And I'm only speaking on tacit knowledge and experience. I deal with a lot of corporates and professionals, and they swore black and blue their bank is gospel. They'll give them. They wasted a lot of time and money because this environment, this field, for those who don't know, NDIS is a specialist field with a specialist product. I know bank managers, when I first approached them 3 months ago, like I told you, Joe, one of the senior managers at Bendigo Bank, oh, yeah, we'll give you. It turned out they came back from senior management. No. It is a specialist field, and it's not as if anyone is trying to get you to use their brokers. Believe me when I say this, I've got prospects and people who are buying now after 3 months of saying, but my broker, but my broker, but my broker. They all went away, they tried this and that, and only in the past 2 weeks they've gone through our brokerage firms and they've been approved, and they're signing up in the next 7 to 8 days. And I'm just vouching on what Joe said, because if it wasn't true, I wouldn't be here pushing it and agreeing with it. And I suppose you can only say, oh, now I know what you mean if you go through it, but a lot of time and wasted opportunity does deplete if you do take that path. Sorry for interjecting, Joe.
Gotcha. Yeah, so we have a process. That process has developed at great expense to the management here over nearly 5 years. So you can just hop on the process, and then all you've got to worry about is how you're going to spend the money, okay, which might give you sleepless nights because there's a fair bit of it, and especially when people are getting multiple of these properties as well. So everything's documented. There's staff within Capital Investment Ideas that are there to step you through the process. I obviously mentioned that all the independent experts that we deal with have done this many times, so they'll step you through as well. So these days, it's really a very simple process. Obviously, it's complicated because, if the banks can't work it out, like Bendigo Bank and those sort, there's a fair bit to it. But we've got it organised, and we've organised it from the back end. So the first thing that we do is we actually get you a participant to move into the house, and then we work backwards from there. So it's 180 degrees different to a normal everyday investment property. And I will explain a bit more about that as well. You guys are all on the database. Like I was saying, I've kept people's details from over the years. Because, if people had done what was suggested at the time, they've made, we've got people that have made tens of millions of dollars. We've got people made a couple of $100,000. And, you follow the process, and, we can see with the benefits of hindsight that you would have, many millions of dollars. And the theory with this NDIS as well is that every year you'll be able to buy another property. Maybe a 2-year gap sometimes, because it depends on when you get your tax returns done for some of the lenders. But if you think every year or two you could be buying another one of these properties for free, that's the theory, and that's the process that we're actually going to be working to as well. which I'll give you some proof of as well. Like I said, don't expect you to believe anything that we say. So the NDIS was an election promise and came into being in legislation in 2016 with the Labor Party. So we all thought that when the Liberals get in, they were going to slash and burn it. But actually, since then, they've actually increased the amount of money that's been spent. And then, of course, Liberals got defeated. Labor came back in again, and they've stuck even more money into it. As far as the houses go, I'm just going to run a little video so you get an idea of why you're spending twice as much money for an NDIS property. We should be able to see that. Hang on. You actually see the picture of the lady in the wheelchair?
I just got a blue screen, grey screen.
All right.
Yeah, can see it now. Yep.
Specialist disability accommodation is as a participant who really wants to progress the ideas of.
And can you guys actually hear her talking as well?
Yep.
Yeah, okay, thanks.
Specialist disability accommodation and how important it is to support a person's life with high-level complex needs and how that can actually make such a difference. And I really want to explore this more to actually then be able to showcase to other people what might work and how they.
Sorry, there's a little box that pops up on my screen and it might be, yeah, okay, I think that's better. Covering the text and whatever else is going on. So this is one of the classic examples of what a high physical support bathroom looks like. It looks like a very nice hospital, better than your average hospital. You've got that hoist and joist across the ceiling there, which is used to help people get out of their wheelchair, into the wheelchair, into the bath, out of the bath, etc. So that means we need reinforced walls. You need reinforced ceilings there as well, and keep an eye on all those details so you understand why we're spending nearly twice as much to get these things built as a normal everyday house.
They can live and do things that they never thought they could do.
We've basically started to talk to the market to be able to say, here is this new segment and it's disability housing. We need to be able to look at it differently to the way we construct today. It's not a...
So we can look all the way out to the footpath and there's not one step all the way into that house. So that means that there's lots of criteria as well. We can't just go and pick any block of land or any suburb and build an NDIS house, even if there were participants to go into it and even if there were staff to get up at 3 o'clock in the morning and wipe somebody's backside. Whole lot more criteria. Here you can see it's a nice wide hallway. You can see that there's no steps inside the house either, even into the bathroom area there on the right. The doors are huge, the handles are huge. There's technology hidden up there, I shouldn't say hidden, but in the top corner of the left-hand door to sometimes enable face recognition, voice recognition, remembering that a lot of these people can't use their arms or legs but still need to get around.
A rocket science. It is just good design. Once we sit down with the person, the occupational therapist, the care team, I get an understanding of what the house and home needs to look like. Part of the projects that I've also run is things as understanding what home for life means.
Some of the mistakes that people have made with NDIS is going and talking to a builder and believing a builder. A builder doesn't care anything about the life of the participant in that house, and anybody can read the specifications for the NDIS requirements. It's detailed down to the last millimetre, so there's no room for confusion, argument, etc. But it's completely irrelevant what the builder says, what the builder does. because a house needs to be built with the participant in mind and who's going to be living in that house and what their family wants and what their needs are. So when we go off and get you a participant, before you even know the property existed or before you bought anything, there's actually somebody in mind for that house. Somebody's waiting for that house. Somebody's got their finance approval for that house to be able to live in it and for you to get paid for that room. And so we are actually having to deal with the NDIS providers who tell us what they want in that house. And obviously the NDIS has a basic specification, but if we just build basic specifications that any builder can build, we're not going to get the houses tenanted at all. There's a whole lot of extra things or standard things that an NDIS provider will want in that house. That's going to cost you, the investor, money, but at least you've got a lease and you've got a participant waiting before you've even signed it, paid any money. There is no worry, there's no stress, there's no, I hope I get a tenant after I've spent $850,000, $900,000. You know, before you've even spent $1,000, you've actually got a tenant with the NDIS providers that we deal with. So the point there is we just can't deal with a builder anywhere to go and build some cheap house, NDIS house somewhere. That's completely irrelevant to the investment that we do these days.
Joe, sorry, it's Simran here. Just to interrupt, just a quick question there. So if it's suppose if there's a couple of people residing in that, so is that factored into that sort of securing the tenants before we come on board?
Yeah, so there's different sort of houses that get built. The profit share houses where we're expecting over $5,000 a week and where people have been actually getting over $6,000 a week, they're basically just based on one participant. So then you just see how that participant is behaving, because a lot of them I shouldn't say a lot of them, but a few of them have got mental issues in that category of house. And, you know, if they are okay or they're getting better or their medication's working or one of their friends wants to come and live with them, then we'll have 2 people in those houses. The NDIS has told us that they want 3 people in those houses in future because you investors are not buying enough houses to satisfy the demand. But to answer the question, we know how many people are going to be in that house before you've even bought that house. All the profit share, there's one person and there's other people that will fit in depending on how that person's behaving. With all the high physical support houses, there are 2 people that are waiting for that house, and that would usually give an income of $170,000 a year up to about $200,000 a year minimum. But we can also put an improved livability person into those high physical support houses and get another pile of income as well to take it at 210, 220,000, something like that. So yeah, we do have a very, very good idea of who's going into the house from day one and how many people too.
Yep. Okay.
Just one point of clarification. The agreement is with the participant or with NDIS? So is NDIS actually taking on the lease or is it the participant?
Sort of all of the above.
Right.
All right. Yeah. And the whole process is actually you as the owner of the house have a lease with an SDA provider. So an SDA provider is a specialist disability accommodation provider who looks after the house. At the same time as looking after the house, so, you know, he's the equivalent of Little Real Estate Ray White from the housing point of view. However, he has a whole lot more legal responsibilities and duties of care when it's an NDIS house. And he will actually then deal with an NDIS provider, so an NDIS provider is the company that looks after the participant, or they can deal with a SIL provider, which is supported independent living provider. So that's somebody that needs care and needs accommodation. And they'll usually have agreements with, they'll have understandings with those groups of people. There's the SIL providers, the NDIS providers, and then the participants will sign a lease with the SDA provider. So there's quite a few people involved. There's sort of 5 different groups of people involved, but it's, and then of course the NDIS themselves have an agreement with the SDA provider. So the SDA provider needs to be licensed, audited, insured, etc. And the money goes from the NDIS to the SDA provider. There's also some comes from the Commonwealth Government as well, and then that the SDA provider keeps their share and sends the rest to us. So yeah, it's a few more steps involved then, and that's all changed recently as well, because once upon a time it was the NDIS provider that was doing the leases, but the government says that's now a conflict of interest and they're not allowed to be owning the house or having the arrangement directly with the participant. It's got to go to a separate company. Otherwise, they were sort of stuck in a house where they might be getting substandard service or overcrowded houses, and they couldn't get out because they had an agreement with the SDA provider and they didn't have any freedom of choice. So if anybody watched the Four Corners report that said how terrible NDIS was, it was absolutely correct, because it was just showing you what the living conditions for these people are before we come along and build them a specialised house for them to move into. Because, you might have 20 people living in a 5-bedroom house, for example. Does that make sense? Answer the question. You'll have a lease with the SDA provider. You'll actually get the lease before you pay any money. You can have a read of the lease, and that explains who it's with, what the rules and regulations are as well. And it's typically a commercial lease because the SDA provider knows that once that participant's moved into that house, they're really never moving out again unless they go back to hospital, or die. So yeah, they want to give you a 10-year lease up front in virtually all examples with all the NDIS providers that we deal with, plus 5-year options after that. So therefore, it drops into the commercial lease category.
So as people age, the need changes. So you try and make the design for future-proofing. I also...
Actually, that's probably a good point as well when it comes to lease. They provide, the NDIS providers know that these people aren't going to move out, like we said. And so one of the NDIS providers is now wanting to give us 40-year leases because some bright spark took the government to court and won, because they said that once a person hits 65, if you kick them out of their NDIS house, because the NDIS was only up until age 65, and once people hit 65 years old, it flipped over to aged care. They said to the government, well, that's discriminating on somebody based on age. And so that was apparently correct. And so now somebody who moved into your NDIS house, they're allowed to live there until the day they die. So that, and it means that you get the NDIS rent for them as well till they, for whatever reason, move out of that house, which might be 40 years' time, 50 years' time as well. So that's another huge, better than expected thing for us, because some people were all stressed out about what was going to happen after 20 years and etc.
find by going and meeting the client and their families in their own home, it gives me an understanding of what is actually needed for the person that we're building this for.
Specialist disability.
That's one of the entry-level improved livability sorts of houses. Just lighting on the floor, lots of space, easy for people to get around, find their way around. They might be vision impaired, might have a very low IQ, but they can still get around the house, still make themselves lunch and go off and catch the bus.
Accommodation is really important to me as central to the NDIS because it allows a person to have that chance to have a home, a space, be part of the community and celebrate what they really need to make that life come alive.
Alrighty. So if I just sit back to the presentation, that just gives us an idea of whether it gets spent. Also, why the normal everyday finance companies are useless to us, because the house looks like a normal everyday 4-bedroom house from the outside, and that's somebody needs to mute himself. I just can't see from my little panel at the moment who it might be. So what I was saying,
Okay.
guys,
Over good to say.
let me see. Can somebody mute? Because I've hidden show video panel. Let's have a look.
They keep calling me.
Anyway, all right. So when we started this, we've been doing this for nearly 5 years now. Like I said before, we were terrified that there wasn't going to be any demand. We'd build a house, there'd be nobody to move in, or the government would come along and shut it down when the government changed. However, the government started talking about it, nearly 20 years ago. They needed to house people because typically people in Australia that are disabled have been looked after by their families. But of course, then their families got old and couldn't look after themselves, let alone look after some person with a disability. So we know that there was a demand. They estimated that there would be about 28,000 people that would need a house by the time the NDIS was fully organised. Before we even got to COVID, if you can see there's 122,000 people that were actually needing accommodation before COVID. And then COVID came along. So COVID was fantastic for anybody that had an NDIS property or that invested in NDIS property. So once again, every cloud's got a silver lining. In this case, there were so many people sick and dying in the aged care facilities that the government said everybody that's not meant to be there needs to get out, and that was everybody under 65, so they got moved. Where did they go? We know that they all went to hotels because there were no tourists. So then there's been pressure on us to go and build these houses to accommodate them rather than stick them back in aged care facilities, which I don't think too many people want to be living in an aged care facility. So of course that was, young people, people that end up in the nursing homes were, kids that had fried their brains on drugs or fallen off their motorbike or smashed their cars or had some sort of other accident as well, but there was nowhere to put them. In Mildura, where one of the fathers there has a property, we sort of worked out that there was a demand for about 40 participants that were waiting for houses. But once you start to the participants and their carers and they learned that there were houses being built, there's now a demand for a couple of hundred rooms in that area as well. So the list is definitely not going down.
Hey, wait till
And
the time.
somebody's
I
microphone.
think it's either Frank or Raghu that needs to mute. Everyone else has muted. So if they
Okay.
could please, thank you. That's
Oh, I
fine.
don't.
Yeah. So I just can't see it because I've shrunk my panel so it doesn't take up the presentation screen. So we know that the waiting list is actually not going down, just on the figures from 28,000 estimate to be 120 to before COVID. COVID came along, you couldn't keep people in a nursing home anymore, and you also couldn't keep them in hospital because the government said our hospitals are all going to be overrun by COVID patients. And now they're put in the back of our head that our hospitals are all going to be overrun by disease X. Come up sometime soon in the future. So they wanted all these people with a disability out of the hospital system. Definitely not going down. And, the proof of that is that I keep saying when we started, but you've got to understand that a lot of people didn't buy because they thought the government was going to turn it off, or they couldn't understand why we were getting $100,000 to $150,000 a year for a $460,000 investment property. $600,000 was how much it was costing to buy a high physical sport house before COVID. So the government actually increased the rent from $40,000 a room up to $80-something thousand a room. So if they were going to turn it off, cut it, they would have actually reduced the rent then. And I was a little bit behind today, but we can also email you what the let's have a look. Oh, you can probably already see that. This is pricing for after July 2023. It's a bit faint up there, but anything that I'm talking to you about is all documented, like I've said, so we can email that to you anytime we like. The houses we're building all have on-site overnight assistance or accommodation. We look on the government. This is the government's, anything that's possible in it is to do with the NDIS, typically. So there's one room, we're getting $89,000 per room, straight off the government price list. And then on top of that, we get a little bit more income. That's just the rent for that room. And the previous price list for the previous financial year will show that income is about $46,000 a year. So if the government was going to turn it off, they would have turned it off by now instead of doubling the rent that we get paid. And over here for improved livability houses, the rent went from $25,000 a room to $75,000 a room. So the government's telling us more rooms. Supply and demand, same old thing. You've all been getting emails from us, and you've been seeing that the houses cost anywhere from $600,000 to sort of $750,000, $800,000 to build these days. According to the NDIS, every 5 years they actually do a huge report. 2023, 2024 prices are there, and houses that we've just sent out to you. There was an email over the weekend. Robust house there, according to the government experts, to account all the factors. That house that you can buy from us for under $750,000, the government says it's worth over $1 million just for the house, just to build the house. So this is why we don't have any problems with finance. We don't have any problems with valuations, because we're doing bulk purchasing with the builders. We've got good clients that get their finance organised in 99% of cases, so there's no mucking around there. And this is what the rent is based on from the government. They're thinking that you're spending a couple $100,000 $500,000 or a lot more on the land, and then you're spending $1 million on the build. So the average NDIS property out there it's $1.3, $1.5 million. And therefore, encourage an investor who needs to spend that amount of money, it needs to be a significant amount of rent to make it worthwhile. So you guys are taking advantage of the fact that the $1 million house, we're getting a couple $100,000 cheaper. The valuation comes in fantastic, and the rent is based on what the government has calculated that it should be worth to build it. Then also, people have thought, well, why would the government pay that amount of rent? But the supply and demand is one thing. Not having people in the hospitals and not having them in aged care are things that we've already talked about. And when they're not in aged care, when they're not in the hospital, and it's saving the government a lot more than $560,000 a year these days, because Shorten said that it costs about $14,000 a week to keep a person with a disability in accommodation in a hospital. So if you think $14,000 a week, 52 weeks in the year, whatever that is, every room that we build is saving the government $700,000 in accommodation costs. When you think that they're only paying you $80,000 a year, government's getting a screaming bargain. Okay, getting a huge bargain in the amount of money that it's saving on accommodation costs for those people. That was relevant once upon a time. It shows you that the government got themselves really organised and really organised fast, put on hundreds of extra staff in NDIS and got people accommodated and looked after, which was quite impressive, actually. So you don't really hear too many complaints about NDIS at all. You know, there's some tradespeople charging a bit of extra money, but in a lot of cases that's warranted. Anyway, they need specialists, they need special insurances, they need special training. Not everybody can just deal with NDIS at all. Once upon a time, we had to work out where the areas of greatest demand were, and the really good thing about NDIS is everything is documented. So we can go to a demand map. We can just search for it on Google. NDIS demand map comes up with a map. You put in a postcode, or you think, you know, oh, gee, Kilmore's going to have good capital growth. So you can then think, should I be building an NDIS property in any area? You can put in the postcode and it can show you what the demand is in that particular area for people that have already got their finance organised to rent that property or rent that room from you. Now, the problem with that is that there are no houses in virtually any area that are available for rent. There are in some areas because, you know, like we said before, you've had the builders that have just gone out and built things on new estates, but people don't want to, in a lot of cases, they can't live in a new estate if there's not shopping centres, bus services, or staff to look after them. So if there aren't houses, there's no point going and getting your finance approved. The application to get NDIS funding for accommodation might take anywhere from 6 months to a year to get approved, and it's obviously costing the NDIS providers to pay somebody to do all that paperwork. So, you know, why would they do that if there's no house available? So very much a catch-22. So we can't just sit on the internet and work out where the best place in Australia to buy a house is. We actually have to be on the ground. We have to be visiting areas. We have to go see the NDIS providers. We have to go and interview their staff. We have to make sure those staff want to get up at 3 o'clock in the morning and, you know, be in this particular area. And they can get home from that area when, you know, evening shifts finish, etc. So there's 1,000 more steps to this procedure than just buying a normal everyday investment property. If you bought an everyday investment property, you know, you buy some land, you can talk to any builder you like, they'll build a house, 1 month before it's completed, you go to the local real estate guy, you say the house is going to be completed in 4 weeks, start advertising. When it's completed, you give him the keys and he takes people through, and within a couple of weeks it's rented. Nothing like that happens with NDIS. We've actually got to start with the participant, like I said before, build a house that they're going to want to live in and that the staff are going to be able to manage as well. A completely different theory. So this is sort of irrelevant these days because we're dealing with NDIS providers, and the NDIS providers tell us we need houses in this area. And so obviously I'm going to say to them, well, if you give us a lease and the returns are okay for our investors, then we'll promote it to our investors, because, we can't promote anything that doesn't have a lease because then you're not going to make any money. You're not going to be able to buy another one from us next year, which is our whole theory. You'll be buying one every year. We're not charging you any money to put all this together for you, do the homework, drive around the country, pick up NDIS providers at 7:30 in the morning on a Sunday morning, take them out for dinner and drinks till 4 o'clock or 3 o'clock in the morning either, so that, they'll give us their participants for the buildings that we want to put together. You heard the gentleman, the consultant in the video, talk about Home for Life. I think the lady in the wheelchair talked about it as well. And that's why our leases have been extended as well, because once the people are in, the house is custom designed for them. They've got their own technology. They're very, very, very rarely ever going to move out. There's 4 categories of houses. We're building 2 of those categories. The profit share houses are the robust house. And when people think about robust house, they think about somebody with a mental problem. And that's correct. However, it's not everybody. A lot of people that fall into the robust category might just have depression. And there's plenty of those still lingering thanks to COVID, And just remember, you weren't allowed to go and see your mum. You weren't allowed to go to work. You weren't allowed to go to, your favourite coffee shop. You weren't allowed to see your friends. You weren't allowed to go exercising. So all those things have had a devastating effect on a lot of the population. Getting locked up with your husband or wife might have contributed to that as well. So huge, huge area of demand. But because a lot of investors thought I was going to have a crazy person running around my house, they didn't want to build a house for that, because they were terrified the house was going to get destroyed by the crazy person. And, plenty of crazy people will try and destroy your house, but the way that it's built, it's impossible to destroy it anyway. Maybe they could burn it down with a bit of luck, but you don't really care anyway, because that's what your insurance is for, and you'll get a better, newer one with greater depreciation if they do succeed, which has never happened that I know of anyway. So because these houses were not getting built, and remembering right at the start, we said we would usually only have one person in those houses. The one person, the rent for a person in a robust house used to be $40,000 a room. And of course, you could only have one really crazy person in a house. So that's all the rent that you were going to get. But that house cost you just the same to build as a high physical support house. But in a high physical support house, you could put 2 or 3 people. So no investor was going to build a house that the same and only get $50,000 a year in rent when they could be getting at least $100,000 a year in rent for the same house. So we went to the biggest NDIS provider in the country for robust category people and said to them, you need accommodation, don't you? And nobody's building houses for you. No investors are building houses for you. And there's only so much money that you can borrow. And you're not even allowed to own the properties in the future either, that's now become law. The NDIS providers are not allowed to own the property because the government sees that as a conflict of interest. So that's really good for us, all right, because the properties that you would have seen emailed out to you, like completed apartments in Sydney, they were all bought by one of the NDIS providers. But in December, it became illegal for them to actually own it. It's conflict of interest. So they had to sell. So they gave it to us, and 19 apartments disappeared in less than a week. That's how much demand there is for these sort of things. So the people running the robust category had to come up with a better deal than just paying an investor rent. So that's why we came up with the profit share deal. Took from April to September to get that organised for our clients. And what that is every dollar that house generates, we get a share of the net profit out of that house. So that's a fantastic option. And I've got some more recent figures. Let me just see if I can share that we came across, that we got from one of the investors lately. So I'll just share that. When you see the emails come out, it says expected $5,000 a week in income. Now, this was before this financial year. Rent's gone up a little bit since then. Other fees and charges have gone up a bit since then as well. So, we're telling you 250 grand a year. If you only got $238,000, you're not going to be too upset with us at all. So these are actual real life figures that have been paid to the investors on nearly half a dozen houses there. And this financial year, we're certainly expecting a lot closer to 300,000 than 250 as well. But there is pressure on you guys to hurry up and get off your backside because there's not an unlimited supply of people with a disability. And even if there was, there is a shortage of carers to look after them. Because if you think every one of these houses that we build is going to create about 10 jobs, and we build 10 houses, that's 100 jobs that the NDIS provider has to now accommodate or hire and administer. So there's bottlenecks all the way through this system, which means once you're in, you're sitting pretty for a very, 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 very long time. So that explained the robust category and why we get so much money. Okay. Now, the houses are indestructible. You can fire a bullet into the window, and I'm pretty sure it still won't break the window. The walls are soundproof. They're indestructible. We've got a walkthrough where I walk through one of these completed houses and explain to you what it's built of, why it's built that way, and where all your money goes. And then you'll be, quite comfortable with them. The high physical support houses, they're built to accommodate somebody in a wheelchair that needs 24-hour care and needs to be lifted in and out of their wheelchair, etc. But somebody that's also the category of fully accessible can live in the high physical support house. And somebody that's in the improved livability category can also live in a high physical support house. So once upon a time, last financial year, improved livability income was $23,000, $25,000 a room, but high physical support was $45,000 a room, roughly. This financial year, improved livability, like I said before, went to over $70,000 a room because the government realised no investor is going to build improved livability houses when they could be building for nearly the same price a high physical support house and be getting, twice the rent as well. So that means that, and like we said at the start, we know that there's going to be a high physical support house in any high physical support person in any PS house that we would promote to you and give you a lease. And then usually the owner's not too fussed about whether it's fully accessible or improved livability because there's only about a $10,000 difference in the rent, and improved livability 70-something, fully accessible around 80 per room. So there's no need to be greedy with all this at all. You're helping people. It's this spectacularly good karma. Their families will love you forever, and you're getting paid very, very well for it as well. The other point is that in the budget and in the Royal Commission into Aged Care and Disability, the government pointed out that for every dollar that it spends in the NDIS, the economy generates $2.2. So it's just a very, very big pie, and there's no losers in this at all, except maybe the taxpayer, somebody that's not invested in getting their tax back and is just sitting there whinging about how high their taxes are. All right, that'd be the only loser in this whole adventure, because obviously the participants are winning by having a house that they never want to move out of, that's custom designed for them in an area where they want to live. The families, the pressure comes off the families enormously, having somewhere for these people to live safely and be properly cared for. Because, if you think people living with a disability in their family home, it can be just a complete nightmare to even get them into a bath, or into a shower. Have a think about, the average age of a house in Australia. Not everybody's living in a brand new house, or steps or whatever it might be. Yep. And then, of course, you've got the carers. So carers are earning good money these days. A lot of them, were, they're not trained nurses in a lot of cases, but they can be earning $35, $85 an hour. They can be earning a lot more than that, doing sleepovers and weekends and things like that. So there's really, really, really good money. I had a lady that was a bookkeeper earning $15 an hour. And, became an NDIS carer and went to earning $85 an hour. So she was exceptionally happy. And, of course, she's doing a good job because she's looking after somebody and she liked them and was getting paid for babysitting one of her friends, basically. When we look at the challenges, the downsides, obviously we've touched on the cost. I've mentioned that it might cost double to build one of these in a normal everyday investment property, but it's not really a downside because you're getting about, we're getting, let's say, $250,000 a year in rent. Whereas if we spent $850,000 on a house in the typical areas where we'd invest in around Melbourne of maybe Clyde North, we would get something around there, Berwick area. We would be lucky to be getting $700 a week in rent, $35,000, $36,000 a year in rent. Compare that to $250,000 a year. We're getting 7-8 times the rent for a house that's only costing us twice as much. The government is waving a very, very, very big carrot in front of you guys to invest, and we know the reasons why. So, costs a bit more to build. All the houses we build are pretty much indestructible anyway. You see the giant sizes of the bathrooms, all the reinforcing in the walls. When you look at the walkthrough that I've done, that I can email you if you haven't seen it already. There's a $7,000 bench in the kitchen, just with a little wind-up arm on it. So there's significant cost with all this. Typically, it used to take a bit longer to get them built. These days, thanks to the volume and the standard design that each NDIS provider wants us to use, we can be getting them done in about 4.5 months or so. So, even if you're buying something today, we would still be expecting that you'd be finished by the end of the year. Whereas, people that bought before COVID, some of them only finished end of last year. So that's like nearly a 3 or 4 year period to get them done. So these days things are flowing very nicely. So it's a pretty straightforward procedure. And of course, when I wrote this presentation, I was terrified of not having participants, but that's completely irrelevant because all you guys will have a lease on day one, completely irrelevant. Even if a participant goes back to hospital, moves back with family, whatever, the government will continue to pay you 3 months of rent while we find somebody to match with the existing participant inside the house as well. So the government's thought of probably everything to do with this, and they've thrown money at it to make sure it happens. So very good idea to stick your hand out and grab some of that money that's floating around. The rent's all calculated by the government, has nothing to do with us. There's no, greedy landlord scenario. Here, I'll just flip over to a real life calculator so you can have a look at it, because the real life calculator is for properties that we're going to be releasing in probably about 2 months or 3 months from now, by the time we get full approvals for them. So this is the SDA calculator. Release a new one, usually before the 30th of June each year. And you can see that I've actually already gone and filled this in. But just look, we've got $126,000 a year for a 1-bedroom apartment with sprinklers in the far west. Yeah, New South Wales far west, which is Broken Hill. So we can build an apartment there for just a fraction under $700,000 and be getting rent of 126 plus some other income. It's up to $137,000 a year. So we're going to be building 15 of these, and they'll be suitable for your superannuation funds because they're a 1-part contract. Now, if that was built for this financial year, well, the income's about $10,000 less in that area. So that's where the Royal Flying Doctor Service is. So we know that there's always a demand out that way. But we can pick where any of you guys live, and Sydney, the price of land is just crazy. So we build an apartment out in Blacktown this financial year. So it says post 23. We're getting $108,000 for that apartment. Actually, apartments are probably not a good idea, not a good example. Anyway, $96,000 if it was built before this financial year. So government's increased even the apartments. If I just have a look at a house with 2 residents out in Blacktown, that's huge rent, by the way, last financial year. So let's have a look. If we've gone from $85,000 per room, remember, this year, what's it gone up to? 91. Yeah, not a big jump. So I'm not really picking good examples, but it's for improved livability gone from about 23 up to 70 something.
Joe, can I interject for a sec? You've said twice they're not good examples, but this is good that you're showing this, because these are worst case scenarios. And look at the return. For every $6 you spent, you're getting 1 back every year. So that is still quality return.
So there's a couple of things going on here. All right. One is that the base price has gone up because there's such a huge demand. And I'm saying, oh, this is a shit example, but you're getting $192,000 a year. Okay. So, everybody I know would be pretty happy getting $192,000 a year in an area where we know there's a demand because the government's increased the rent as well. And on top of that, even if they don't change the rent, anything to do with the rent, the rent goes up anyway based on inflation. It's indexed to inflation for the 20 years that you've signed up into the NDIS scheme, your house. Once your house is enrolled in the NDIS scheme, every year the rent will go up indexed to inflation. So last year when we had 7% inflation, we were all really happy. We were probably the only people that were happy about such a high rate of inflation because all the rents went up automatically as well. So the point of this exercise is the rent's nothing to do with me. It's nothing to do with the SDA provider, NDIS provider participant. Okay, the government sets the rent in different areas, and that's also part of our homework to work out what areas are going to give you the greatest returns for the dollars that you need to get that built and get it through to completion. The thing that I'll just touch on while I've got spreadsheets open is why you're going to be able to buy another one of these next year. Have a look. And it's because we're manufacturing our own capital growth. John, can you see the spreadsheet, immediate capital growth? Maybe. Anybody else?
Yeah.
Sorry, I'm on mute. Yes, Joe. Sorry, I'm on mute. So I
right.
interrupt. Yes,
Yeah.
I can see it very large.
All
Sorry,
right.
Joe, I do
Yeah, so it's
apologise.
nice and large. If we pick one in the middle, because there's not any $750,000 houses around anymore, $850 is a really good price point, because that's giving us about a 30% return on our money, 5 to 30%, depending on what sort of a property it is, of course. So, you know, there's some real life examples here. So Bendigo's one of the, I think it's the 4th best city in Victoria. Income there, 250 grand a year. Now, if we bought that property, it gets built, money's going into your bank account of about $250,000 a year. We go to a commercial lender, remembering we said it's a commercial lease, it's not a residential lease. Any commercial lender looks at what the income is as to the value of the property. So you might think that's a silly example, but there's plenty of banks will see you have a 20-year lease, maybe you've got a 40-year lease. They'll see money going into your bank account at that rate. And even if they only gave you a cap rate, which is how they work out the value of the property, of 10%, and I did that because it just makes the maths easier, that property giving you a 10% return. So if an investor was happy with a 10% return, you could sell him your completed house for $2.5 million, right? If he was happy to buy your property from you with a 7% return, then you could sell it to him for $3.5 million. Now, nobody's really happy with a 7% return these days, unless you're buying a normal everyday investment property, which I don't know why you would. I have no idea why you would, because your return's only going to be, maybe around the 5% mark. But we've got banks that will loan you based on a 7% cap rate in the metropolitan areas, and they want a higher return in the regional areas. So conservatively, we could refinance that a bit over $3 million. Ultra conservatively, worst case scenario, which is, there it is, worst case scenario there, like John kept saying, and we only got a 60% lend, we could refinance that property up to $1.5 million. So you paid a deposit on that. You didn't pay $850,000. If you refinance it for 1.5, you've actually got your deposit back, and you've got another $650,000 to spend. So John's going to be coming knocking at your door. I'm going to be coming knocking at your door. You're going to get another 50 emails from us, because you can afford to buy another couple of these properties. You can also afford, if the banks would loan you 70%, you could afford to pull out even more. And while we've been talking, somebody's been sending me pictures of Ferraris. There you go. There's your free Ferrari from just one of these properties in the first year. So, stick to the process, stick to the procedure. We talked about that at the start. We're making all our capital growth up front with these things, because the capital growth is based on the income. The income's only going up indexed to inflation over time. So not sitting there waiting for 10 years for this property to double in value like you would with all your other investment properties. Now, anybody that's been waiting for property to double every 10 years has done spectacularly well over the years by refinancing those properties when they've got enough equity, using that deposit to go and buy another property. So we've just turbocharged all this by commercial lease, got lenders that will loan based on those cap rates. Once they see the house is complete, money going into the bank, you can refinance, get your deposit back, buy another one, and then, of course, we'd encourage you to think about borrowing even more and buying another couple. So best customer, completed one house, refinanced, bought 4. So if you think 4 lots of NDIS income, that's a pretty good income and has taken the pressure off school fees, vacations, and having nice cars on the road as well. Yep. Just having a look at what questions have popped up. Alrighty, so do presentation. Let's have a look. We're just showing that all this is independent through the government. And obviously this is an old calculator. New calculators, you get a bit more money, like we've said too. And we can work out exactly how much money you're going to get and exactly how much money would be going into your bank account, or is expected to go into your bank account, and what I meant to be saying. Because, we're going to know what interest rates the banks are offering you. We're going to know, what the rates are for that particular area. We're going to know how much the the SDA provider charges you to manage the property. So we can do cash flow forecasts for you and tell you best case scenario, worst case scenario, how much tax you're paying, all that sort of thing. And these are real life examples from September 2020, where somebody bought a $596,000 house, and it's actually the worst case scenario for them was putting $770 a week into their bank. Best case scenario is putting about $1,200 a week into their bank. But like we said, that's all gone up a lot since then. There was a question from Tanya about the leases before. It's actually different. Different NDIS providers have different leases. I should also say that a lot of people that have got investment properties might want to look at knocking down a shitty old rundown house somewhere in the suburbs that's costing them money for maintenance, and they're getting low rent, and putting a block of apartments or putting, one of these NDIS houses on existing land. So if people do have existing land, just let us know where that land is, and we can work out what is going to be the best use of that land, what the demand is for NDIS from NDIS participants, if we can get a lease for them, and that would definitely be worthwhile considering as well. Some of the NDIS providers will give us a guarantee. So if you're 75 years old and you don't care about trying to squeeze every last dollar out of your investment, and you'd be happy with $85,000 a year for the next 20 years, then there are some NDIS providers that'll guarantee that income for you as well. A lot of people think it's like DHA, but it's not really anything like that, because we actually bill where the demand is from the participants, not in an area to scare Indonesia away from invading Australia. And we're getting a huge cash.
Can I add something to that? There's a lot of NDIS property out there, and I'm sure there's a lot of smart investors out there. A lot of opportunities, and there's a lot of excitement about, we've got this house, we've got this house, we've got this house. One key factor that you need to keep in mind is that there's 100 people building NDIS houses and there's 200 ads. just keep in mind, unless you've got a good relationship with a service provider who has got participants ready and waiting, you're throwing your money away. And I mean that with pathos, with passion. And a key factor that Joe said 2 minutes ago was, if you've got land, if you've got something that's costing you money and the capital growth is stagnant because of the way that the government's designed that investors are going to suffer because they want first homeowners to be able to purchase a home at the cost of the investor, you can utilize that land, and all you do, as Joe said, send it off to us. We'll do a feasibility and viability study with the NDIS. They'll come out straight away and say if it's worthwhile, and you'll have answers knocking on your door very, very soon. But the key factor here is any product that we have, you can be rest assured that there is a participant waiting to move in because of the good and strong relationships we have because of our reputation with the service providers of NDIS. Sorry, Joe, I just had to add that. That's
Yeah, no, it's a good point because, people say, oh, I'm going to buy in Western Australia.
Yeah.
And yeah, the land's cheap in Western Australia. All right. The figures on the calculators look good, but they're actually today they're building more houses in Western Australia than are going to be required by 2042. So that the vast majority of those houses are never, ever, ever going to be rented out for NDIS. So that's just builders getting cheap land. The figures are correct that they show people to say that there is a big demand over there, but we just know how many are being built from the NDIS providers that we deal with over there. It's just insanity. So it's a really good point.
And it's good and proper if they're building. So basically, sorry for interjecting again, Joe. For every one participant, the way that things are going with all these builders and investment organisations, they're building 4 houses for every one participant. Good on them. But unless they've got a relationship with the service providers that will guarantee them oh geez, I forgot the word. What's the word? Come on, a participant. They're just eager to sell you a house, and they don't care whether you get a participant or not. And that's what's happening in the West, and it's happening in quite a few places as well. Tanya, I told you about some property, some apartments in Footscray. Remember I was telling you? I've got a little bit more clarity on them, and Joe can go into them a little bit later or another day. And it's all about viability, and it's all about having the relationship to give you a participant, to give you the money, to put a smile on your face and your pocket, your hip pocket and your wallet. Because if we do that, in 12 months' time, you'll be spreading positive words about us and you'll be back to invest your money again. If I do the wrong thing by you, if Joe does the wrong thing by you, all I'm going to hear is negativity, and my name is not to be thrown in the mud. I wouldn't be here wasting your time or mine. Sorry, Joe.
No, that's right. So, we've touched on a lot of things and you might think I've rambled on and we have gone off and proved these things, but everything we've said, there's proof. All right. There's proof why we invest in one area and we do not invest in another area as well. And, if we try to explain everything that we have to do, it's going to take 3 weeks for me to explain why we're not recommending places in Footscray, but we are recommending, St. Mary's, for example.
And one thing you haven't touched on, Joe, because some people might leave, some people might have to leave, or there is an expression of interest form, and it's worked quite well with all my prospects who have become clients. They leave a minimal deposit. It holds the property. It locks it in. If for some reason you change your mind, there's no gun to your head. You'll get your money back. But you can do all your homework, and all the quality properties do not last. You might be looking at a property. I had a couple that wanted a property, not now, but they said, oh, we're looking at 12 and 15 months away. I said, fantastic, because that's how long some properties take, 7, 8, 9, 10 months. And guess what? They locked it in at today's price, and they remunerated themselves effective immediately when the property was ready, and the capital growth is to kick in when that house is finalised. So there's a lot of key factors you need to understand, and the main one is that your money is safe. Okay, your money, there is no gun to your head. There's no shonky contracts here. It's all government. It's all endorsed by the NDIS. And with that expression of interest form and that deposit, you've locked something in. You can go away and speak to your finance advisor and waste your time. Speak to our mortgage broker. It costs nothing. Talk to him, and then you can come back and evaluate. And guess what? If it doesn't put a smile on your face, you get money back. Easy as that.
Yeah. No, that's right. There's no stress from our point of view because we know these things sell immediately. There's a couple of other questions that have come in. In self-managed super fund, it's very, very, very smart to be buying these things in super, because once you've hit 60, don't work full-time anymore, no tax. Obviously check that, but there's no tax on the income and there's no capital gains tax should you sell. And people will sell them. All right. Usually you don't like to sell property, and that goes against everything that most have been taught about investing. But in super, nothing's stopping you selling it. You only pay, if you're, like you said, over 60, there's no capital gains tax if you're not working full time. I always said check that, because the government changes the rules on us all the time. But, you've had huge capital growth. You take that money, you buy a couple. You can buy 3 or 4 and off you go again, and you've got an extraordinarily high income in retirement, and you're not paying government taxes on it. The Victorian land taxes are a huge pain in the backside, and they're a huge drag on resources for a lot of people, and it actually has put people off investing in Victoria. So, it's quite a stupid thing to increase land taxes when there's such a housing crisis, because it's also, when people get a choice of buying in Queensland or in Victoria, depending on where their other properties are, then they're not going to pick Victoria because the income's the same, the land's about the same, but the land tax, there's a huge difference in the amount of land tax depending on where their other properties are. Sorry, I skipped self-managed super fund. Any of the properties that we talked to you about, you can purchase in self-managed super fund. All right, anything. To get a 2-part contract turned into a 1-part contract, or to put it into your super fund, there's a whole lot of costs associated with it. They're definitely worthwhile doing for the vast majority of people, and they'll pay themselves back in a year or 2, and then you're cruising after that. Because if you think you just added $170,000 to $250,000 on top of your income, obviously you're going to have finance costs, maybe interest costs might be about $70,000 or so. So, add $150,000 worth of extra income. That's going to push most people into the next tax bracket. It's going to put them into the 40, whatever it is, 6 cents in the dollar, or whatever it is these days. So half of that money can just disappear in tax straight away. Whereas if it's in your self-managed super fund and you don't need the money straight away, depending on your age, and that's why we had financial planner up the top there. Anybody over, mid-40s, definitely over 50s, need to talk to a financial planner about getting some of these properties in SMSF, as well as in their own name if they're not at retirement age. And the apartments that we mentioned before, those 19 in St Mary's that all sold in a week, some of our clients have got a 90% lend against those apartments. So we know up to a 90% lend in self-managed super fund is possible. I'm not saying everybody's going to get it. Usually we're getting an 80% lend in super for these properties. Remember that the valuations come in as to what people bought them for, or even more if we use a third party to get them built, because there's only one place we can get finance to get an NDIS property built for your super fund, and that place will charge you $10,000 for their services, and then they pass on all the costs, the holding costs that you would otherwise be paying while you got that property built. Because if you bought a block of land, you as soon as you have settled that block of land, you're making loan repayments against to the bank, interest at least, to hold it. And then, of course, as the builder builds, every stage that comes along, he's going to want payment once he's put the concrete slab down, when he's put the frame up, and when he's got the lock-up stage, he's going to want payment. So you're going to have to draw money from your loan and start making repayments on those loans as you go along. So by the time we get one of these things completed in your super fund, it's going to cost you from $50,000 to $100,000 more, roughly. And typically it's closer to $100,000, and you'll need about a 35% deposit. So if we're buying an $850,000 property, we've got $50,000 to $100,000 worth of costs. That's getting us up to $950,000. We've got to pay stamp duty when it's completed, which is probably going to be close to another $50,000. So there's $1 million. We need at least 35% of that. We're going to need about $350,000 in your super. If it's a completed apartment, somebody only needed, a couple of people only needed 10% deposit. Like I said, 90% lend. So they only needed $70,000 plus stamp duty. They needed $100,000 in their super to buy that property. So there's a big difference from something that's completed apartment up to building something off the plan. So, have a chat to us. That's why we've got the accountant's details there. That's why we had the financial planner's details there. But if you had money in super, you'd basically be insane not to buy something like this in there. It's absolutely huge cash flow, and your retirement's all taken care of, in the time it takes you to do this transaction, which add up all the hours of paper warfare that you're going to be doing. It's going to be 1 or 2 days, and then you're effectively set for life. Alrighty. Anything else I'll save for another day? Everybody's got Nyok's emails who sent out the invitation. You got my emails, and you got John, if you've been dealing with John's as well. So we can take it from there. Thanks everybody for coming. It was a really good little chat. We touched on a few new things, and yeah, everything's sort of better than what we're telling you. So off we go. All right. Thanks a lot.
Thank you.
Yep, my pleasure. Yes. And anybody that wants the recording, wants to stare at my face and needs to be put to sleep at night if they can't sleep, let me know and I'll send through the recording as well. Cheers.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Joe. Bye-bye. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone, for my behalf as well. And thank you, Tanya.
And if anybody did have any specific question, then feel free to ask now as well. No? All right.
Good.
Joe, just one quick question. Something about the properties and furnishing them. Is that
yes. Yes. Yeah. Good question. When we send out the brochures, it's got what a package price is. It's actually, sometimes we have tripped people up with that, because we actually include anywhere from $10,000 to $13,000 to have the house furnished. Now, you don't have to have it furnished, but the chances of your house getting leased before the next person in the queue is a lot greater if it's furnished. And some of, depending on the NDIS provider, alrighty. So some of them say you have to furnish it, and of course, because they're giving us the lease, we never argue with them and we just get it furnished. So yes, there's a furniture package with the profit share deal of $13,000, and that $13,000 cost gets paid relatively early in the process, and it's paid within like the first month of you signing up, so that the NDIS provider, the builder, nobody has to chase money from you later on. And what it covers is everything that's shared. So in any of the participants' bedrooms, you don't need to put anything. If they need anything special or extra, it's paid for out of their plan, which is the money that comes from the NDIS to look after them. But anything that's shared in the house, like a TV in the lounge room, like a kettle, like a microwave oven, like a washing machine, we would just save the arguments, save trying to apply to the government for some sort of a funding, and we just get it done on day one, because every week that goes past and there's not somebody in there, it's costing $3 grand, $5 grand. So there's the cost of furnishing, 13 grand. For the normal build to rent houses, it's about 10,000. It's under $10,000. A robust house needs tougher, more specialised equipment put in it as well. You can't just buy the cheapest thing from Amart and stick it in a robust house, you know. Otherwise, it'll end up as firewood matchsticks pretty quickly. Yeah.
Yeah. So is that in the you said that sometimes is in the package price and sometimes it's not. So that'll be just
yeah, in the profit share deal, it's always in the package price. All right. But where we trip people up, where it's not clear, so it's a good question, is that we've got to pay the $13,000 separately. So it means that it's not part of the building cost and it's not part of the land cost loan. So you've got to actually redraw that money. We would always redraw it, so it's a tax deductible expense. To pay that within a month or two of the of you signing up with the property. And all the houses also have a $5,500 SDA fee. The SDA fee it gets paid to a certifier to say that the plans that we want to build do conform to the NDIS standards. And he'll check that house as it's getting built, and he'll sign off on it once it's completed, to therefore allow people to move into that house. So that's another cost that comes straight out of our pocket. It's not added to the house loan or the land loan at all. They're just like nitty gritty of the process, but we can even email you a process so you know what you're up for and when.
Are they still capital cost or are they expended?
Yeah, good question. And you're an accounting question, because I would expense them, and I'm pretty sure that they would disappear in expenses. But some of the accountants just like to write it off every year at some tiny little rate. So I'm not 100% sure, because I have it.
Sorry, go on.
Yeah, because I have expensed them, and then my accountant had an argument with me about them. So I don't know what he ended up putting through, but yeah, not sure.
Another question. You said that 30% is the return on, say, 850,000, and then you get $250,000. What is the SDA agency fee you need to pay?
Yeah, so it's anywhere from the average is 12.5%. That's the most. That's the most popular one. It's not really relevant for the profit share deal, because every expense in the profit share deal is taken out before you get your payment anyway.
Okay.
Yeah. And the profit share deal is where you're expecting that 250 grand a year in that circumstances. So the SDA provider's already been paid. I'm pretty sure they get 12.5% of the income that the house or the rent that the house generates, just to rent.
Yeah, DHA charges about 17%, for property management stuff. So
So most NDIS providers are not far behind. They're usually about 15% up to 15%, 12.5 to 15. There are some that we've got that only charge 10%. They're not-for-profit organisations, so good for them. But yeah, we'll know for each lease what it's going to be, but usually we'd work on about 12.5.
Thanks a lot. Appreciate it.
Yep, my pleasure. Good stuff, guys. Appreciate it too. All right. Thanks, John. See you.
Thank you for your time, Joe. Thank you.
See you, Frank.
Thanks.
We'll speak tomorrow, Joe. You have a good rest of the day, whatever it is there now.
Take a break.
Money never sleeps, and this opportunity doesn't last forever. That's the other thing.
Certainly doesn't.
Yeah. The other thing is that, we're competing against, large fund managers. They're buying 20 of these things at a time. So that doesn't leave many for you, me, and my other buyers. So we actually have to get things done before those guys snap it all up too. Alrighty, done. Thanks, guys.
Thank you.